Okay, so let's get started. Kama nosnim la'ani. So the title of the chapter is Kama ro'i lotet l'chol echad ve'echad. How much is appropriate to give to each ani who comes to you for a gift? Which, of course, we're going to end up with a subjective amount, depending upon the circumstances. But the reason why we're learning this is to sort of give ourselves some guidelines. Kama notnim la'ani, de machsoro asher yechsar lo. How much do you give to the ani? So the Torah says, nason titain lo, right? You shall surely give him. And then it says later in the pasuk, de machsoro asher yechsar lo. Enough to fulfill his deficit, whatever he's lacking. Okay? V'zen nimdad lefi hatzrachim haminimaliyim kifi shenahug ba'oto makom. And that is fulfilled, or that is measured based on the minimal requirements of wherever you are. Now, here we're talking about where it's one poor person, one donor. And of course, that's never the case. But in theory, if one poor person comes to me and I live on an island where I'm the only Jew, and someone's coming to me to see if I can support him, so I have to give him his minimal needs based on what he would need to eat for that day in this place. Ketzah. So how does it work? Im haya ra'ev ya'achiluhu et ha'cherichi biyoter kifi shenahug ba'oto makom. If he's hungry, I have to feed him what is the most necessary staple of food in that place. If he needs to be clothed, I can take him to, the secondhand Salvation Army store or whatever it is, and get him what is the most necessary kind of clothing that a person would need. Ein lo klei bayis. A person doesn't have household utensils or household furniture. Konim lo es chalei habayis ahechreichiyim bioser kifi shenohug ba'osamaka. The most necessary items, the basic essentials of what any person would need to get by in a place like that. So it doesn't have to be a leather sofa, but he should have some chairs and he should have a table. He should have a basic set of milchik silverware or flatware and fleischich flatware and basic plates. Okay. Now, Misha hayaragel mi beis avosav biyoser mimasha nahug ba'osamakom. But let's say a person's standard of living, when his father was alive and taking care of him, was to have a certain standard of living. Kugonim hayadarko lirchov al sus. So let's say, for example, a person used to ride on a horse instead of walking down the street with his legs. V'hayelo eved l'shamsho, and he used to have a servant when he was living in dad's house. V'larutz lefanav kishahaya ashir. Hi everyone, sorry we lost you. Lost you temporarily. Let me plug in the computer to the network. So Now, and of course, so it goes without saying that this idea of standard of living only applies to someone who used to have a certain standard of living and then lost his money. Let's say he doesn't live with dad anymore. Okay. Let's say a person, so he says in the footnote, he says, Venira lanias daiti lahasbir. It would seem to me that kagon mishi hitragel berechev litzarach avodaso kishamatzav hayato. Person used to have a car, right, when his business was going well. Okay, va'atashu ani v'chash shena yachol b'li rechev, and now he's lost his car. Okay, because he had to give back his lease because he couldn't afford to pay it anymore, and now he's worried, how am I going to get by without a car? He says the car would be considered to be, for that guy, dei machsara, whatever he needs in order to get by. Shemikiven shelo pasha ba'atzmo kishihitragel biyoter mima shenohug udomela misharagel mi beis avosov. He says, since he didn't, Mekiven shelo pasha ba'atzmo. In other words, he wasn't what to be a posheya is to be negligent. Like he wasn't abusive of his wealth. He was just basically using basic standards of living that most people have. And even though some people, you could argue, could get by without a car, but if this is what he was used to before, then it would be something that, if we were going to try to support him, we would support him with that kind of standard. Okay. Now, kol zeh b'gabay tzedakah o b'rabim biyachad. Now, all the aforementioned is when you're the gabay tzedakah, and you have, let's say, theoretically, unlimited funds or access to unlimited funds. O b'rabim biyachad, or let's say you're dealing with a communal project where you want to be able to help, let's say, an almana, right, who, let's say, when her husband was alive, had, whatever she needed. And now we as the community, her husband has died, he left her something, but it's not enough. And now we need to step up and support this woman. So, aval ein hayachid levado mechuyev latet la'ani dei machzero af kishayado maseges. But there's no individual who has that kind of responsibility to give to each poor person whatever he needs to supplement their losses, even if he can afford it. Ela modia sa'aro l'rabim. But what he should do is that he should inform the community of this person's situation and let the community take it on as a project. And furthermore, you're not obligated to give I as an individual, I'm not obligated to give to an ani everything he needs if I know that there are other people that can participate, right? And that seems to be fairly obvious. V'rakim harabim lo yazru lo, yitain hayachid la'ani de machsaro im yado maseges. And it's only if there is no community, or the community is not participating for whatever reason to help this guy, that the onus or the burden falls upon the individual. Okay? Dalid. Ani hamachazer al hapsachim, ein nosten lo mehatzdaka matana meruba. He says when an ani goes from door to door to collect tzedakah, you do not give him a large amount of your tzedakah money as a gift. Ela matana mu'etes, you give him rather just a token gift, a small gift. Shemikiven shuhu mechazer al hapsachim hakol nosten lo. Because since he's going from door to door, you can rely on the fact that everyone is giving him, and therefore, you should not give him an exorbitant or large sum, unless now there are certain situations where a guy comes to an ashir and everyone knows that you go to this usher, he gives you a nice gift. So that's that's an exceptional situation. But for the average middle class Jew, you give each person who's going from door to door a small gift. You don't give them a large gift. Now, kishiyesh harbe sha'osfin litzdaka, when you have a lot of people who are collecting tzedakah, which is the case in many communities in Eretz Yisrael, it's the case in many communities in Chutz La'aretz, where sometimes you could have, let's say, on a Sunday or just on a weekday, you could have a whole caravan of guys who are traveling from door to door. So it hasn't happened so much since COVID, I don't think. I mean, have you noticed the significant drop since COVID? Yeah, and I think that's it may be just because people have come to the realization that it's not as cost effective anymore. Could be that expenses have gone up for travel. I don't know it could be that, but I would assume that eventually it'll be back. Maybe, I don't know. We don't know. No, when they come, they have drivers. Yes. Yeah, the best thing would be to put these drivers out of business, in my opinion. I think that the drivers are, part of the problem that is not discussed in the halacha is that what do you do when 50% or 30% of your gift goes to the driver? And that to me is criminal, and it shouldn't be done. Kishiyesh harbe sha'osfin litzdaka, yesh lases pruta l'chol echad. So when you have a large group that are coming, then you should give just pittance to each one, a pruta, he says, which is like a few pennies. Kedei shelo ya'avor alo sa'ametz. So you do that so as not to violate the halacha of do not harden your heart when a poor person comes to you for a gift. In other words, you can't just turn them away. You say, listen, Chaver, there's 20 of you guys. I'll give each of you 5 cents or 10 cents or $1 or whatever I feel that I can give. Now look at this. This is a big chiddush. He says, if you see that through giving a small amount to each one of these guys is only going to increase the number of people collecting to the point where it's not going to stop, then it's better not to give to any. And this, who is he quoting? He's quoting Reb Chaim Ozer, B'Shem Achiezer, V'ayin B'Kuntras Tshuvas Gedolei HaPoskim. So that's really quite astounding. In other words, if the system is broken to the point where there's a non-ending flow of poor people, which I don't think we have in our community, thankfully. No. I don't think it's ever gotten to that bad. But I could certainly understand a community like Bnei Brak or Yerushalayim, where this is being written, and the system becomes so broken that basically it's become standard for hundreds of people to come every day into the Beis Medrash. So then you have to put a stop to it. In other words, there does come a point where you have to basically say the system's not working in its current incarnation. Yeah, for sure. Seems that way. It seems that you should have, like, let's say, just a few pennies for the guy every single day. Like, in other words, cut the slices of pie so thin, but he's basically saying don't not give him, unless he's become a public nuisance, in which case you have a right to ban him, right? But if he's not a nuisance, then why not? In other words, if he comes every single day, so then make a calculation. If I give him 2 cents every single day, or 5 cents every single day, that's 25 cents a week, and then a buck a month, $12 a year. So then it's not a huge amount. You just have to decide how much you feel that this guy deserves, and cut it down into such small increments if he's coming every single day. Okay. Okay. Misha kvar nosan maaser. If a person has already tithed all of his money, in other words, he's made a calculation of how much my 10% is for this year. And and he simply can't afford to give more than his 10th. He can't afford to give a 20%. Yesh misha posek sheshuv lo over alosa ametz ve'enu chayiv loses l'chol misha mevakesh mimenu. There is such an opinion that says that you're allowed to basically say to someone, "I'm sorry, I can't give you." In other words, the prohibition, and he's quoting from Rav Elyashiv and other poskim, you are allowed to say once you run out of cash, you're allowed to turn people away. You do have a right to do that. V'yesh mi sheposek shelamrot shekvar natan ma'aser im yesh lo pruta hu chayv latet lemi shemavakesh mimenu kedei shelo yavar alos hametz. And then, of course, you have the other opinion, which says that no, even if you've already given your 10%, but if you have a pruta in your pocket, you have a nickel in your pocket, you have to give it to whoever comes to ask for it because of the prohibition of do not harden your heart. Ulam im hu ro'eh aniyim dechukim biyoter, afilu im natan ma'aser chayv lases lahem kedei shelo yavar alo yera levavcha. He says, and everyone would agree that if the matzav, if the situation of the ani that's standing before you is so bad that he's truly destitute and he's not going to be able to make it another day if you don't support him with something, so then even if you already have given your 10%, there's an obligation in the Torah of making sure that nothing bad happens to this guy. So the Torah says, "V'lo yera levavcha b'sitcha lo," don't have a bad heart, or don't let it be bad in your heart when you give him. They're learning from those words that you've got to make sure you do something to save this guy's life, if that's really where it's gotten to. In other words, you can't overlook the fact that by not giving him, he's going to truly be wiped out. So thank God we haven't lived in a society like that for a long time. But it's theoretically possible for this thing to happen. Okay. Next. Hadvarim dila'el, diyesh lases pruta l'chol echad, amurim keshe'en lo safek ba'aminutam shel ha'aniyim. He says, everything that we've said up until now, that you should give a pruta to each person who comes to you, that's when there's no reason to suspect any kind of a lack of authenticity, right, or of honesty from the aniyim that have come to you for the gift. Aval, amisto vavim kol hayom birachov va'osvim ksafim. He says, but if you know, he says, a certain percentage of the people who are just wandering around the streets gathering, gathering donations, chelek mehem muchzakim l'ramoim. We know that a certain percentage of them are not what they say they are, and they actually are deceitful people who may be just collecting the money to buy drugs and other illicit substances. V'lachein ein chova lases l'chol echad kedei shelo ya'lavor alos ha'ametz. He says, if you know that there's a percentage in the street that are ramoyim, then if you decide you're going to be more selective in giving, and you're not going to give to each person, so you have a right to do that, and you're not in violation of do not harden your heart. Ulam yeshanagu lases l'chol echad gam ba'ofen zeh sheyesh lanu safek. But there are many who feel that you should still give to every person, even when you have a safek. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, there's always, because anyone can just put on a black jacket and a black hat and say the word tzedakah. I mean, we had it in LA all the time. I don't know if you've ever encountered it here, but there were actually Gentiles who would put on a black hat, say tzedakah, tzedakah. Yeah. Oh yeah. In Hollywood, everything goes. Everyone's an actor, you know. It's true. You know, everyone's, you know, there could be some people who came to Hollywood because they wanted to become an actor and then it just didn't work out. So they figured, okay, ready for my close-up. Yeah. Okay. So there's a difference of opinion when you know that there are some people who are just, and the truth is, I definitely know that there were people in LA that when they would collect tzedakah, they were just going to use the money to buy drugs. And they may have been homeless, right? But even homeless people can get welfare and can get by. People sometimes choose to be homeless because it's as a lifestyle choice, and they'll just get high and just lie in the street all day. Yeah.
Who was collecting everybody, you know, a little bit. Turned out he was a Forest Hill housewife, made $200,000 a year, just thought of doing it. Now she didn't need it; she was wealthy. You know, in Forest Hills. Yeah. I probably gave her like every week when I was coming out to the subway.
And how did they finally discover her?
I don't know. She was very aggressive. She wouldn't let you go. Fine, you know, you don't want money to me, you know, just give. So everyone just get out, you know, get rid of her. But it was a total scam.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen video clips of this where the guy with the camera has followed the beggar, and then turns out they're just, you know, like an average middle class person. Yeah. Okay. Ani she'ein lo isha. So obviously, you know, this halacha has so many ways of understanding it and applying it. I mean, if a person wants to be suspicious, then he could say, well, I'm not going to give to every guy because I don't know if they're trustworthy. And that's why these guys have their certificates. A person with a certificate, you can rest assured that someone has looked into them and discovered that their need is genuine. But then sometimes you read the certificates and it says, so-and-so has 11 children and it needs to marry off 3 of them, and one of them has a health condition. But that's descriptive of just about, you know, 50% of the population of Israel, right? So it does really, now in that kind of situation, the need is genuine, but then you have to ask yourself the question, what do I want to give this person? So the response would be, Lo sa'ametzas levavcha, don't harden your heart and not give him anything. But you don't have to give him more than a pruta, you know, whether it's 5 cents or a loonie, whatever it is. But you don't have to give him a significant gift. And if he's not happy with your gift, it's too bad. Okay. Now, next. Ani she'ein lo isha ubalisa masiin lo. A poor man does not have a wife, and he wants to get married. And he says, I need a certain amount of money in order to get married. So we have to help him financially and help to enable him to get married. The sochrim lo bayis umatzian lo mita uchlei tashmisho ve'achar kach matzian lo isha. So we have to pay for a rental of a home for him. We have to set him up with furniture and with household needs, and then we should pay for his wedding. But how long is that supposed to last? So he says, Im al yedei sheyesh lo rak dira schura, yu lo achar kach da'agos me'echan l'shalim eschar hadira. He says, if by renting him an apartment, you're only addressing the situation temporarily, And now, yeah, he's going to have to worry about where to get the money to pay for the rent after you pay for the initial rent, let's say for the first year. So then, az hanasina l'tzorach kiniyas hadira hi begeter tzedakah v'dei machzora. Then, uh, putting out money in order to pay for the purchase of his apartment would also be within the category of tzedakah and taking care of his basic needs. And this is probably the most controversial thing that I've seen him say so far, which is obviously an Israeli approach to taking care of poverty. How in the world can anyone be expected to shell out tzedakah to pay for everyone's dira? It just doesn't seem like a feasible financial plan. This will very quickly outpace the means of any average balabayas. And so if, let's say, a guy comes and he says, I need to buy my daughter a dira, for her wedding, my response would be, that's your system in Eretz Yisrael. That's not my system in where I come from. So with all due respect, you have a right to do whatever you feel you need to do to support your daughter, but I don't need to participate. That's not called Dei Machzoro, and it's certainly not Dei Machzoro in my community. In my community, if a person doesn't have enough money to buy an apartment, they don't buy an apartment. They go out and get a job and they work and they rent an apartment with the meager earnings that they're able to bring home to support their family. So I can help you if you'd like so I'll give you a pruta, because I'm not gonna harden my heart because you came to me for a gift, and from your perspective you're an ani and you're genuinely an ani, so it's not like you're a fraudster, right? So I'll give you, but I don't have to give you more than a pruta. Okay, we'll hold it here for today. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Continue Mitzvah Shem tomorrow.